Have you ever felt like there just aren't enough hours in the day? You wake up exhausted, you rush to work, you handle endless tasks, you scroll through screens and collapse into bed only to repeat it all tomorrow. Maybe you're a student juggling assignments and jobs, or a parent managing a household and career. Maybe you're in ministry, pouring out consistently with little time to refill. In our always-on culture, the concept of rest feels foreign, even irresponsible. But what if rest isn't laziness? What if it's holy? Today we're talking about the importance of the Sabbath and rest in such a busy world. And the world today is busier than it has ever been before. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll learn not only why the Sabbath matters, but also how to practice it without falling behind on life. And I know that can be a big fear for a lot of people out there, where you feel like you're just not doing enough either for the kingdom or for your family. But there's some strong evidence to suggest that resting and giving your worries to God is actually biblical. So in this first section, we're going to take a look at this one concept, and that's that the Sabbath is a day of rest modeled by God Himself at creation. So if we go back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, by the seventh day, God had finished the work He had been doing. So on the seventh day, He rested from all His work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. So it's not just a tradition, it's a command. God Himself used the seventh day as a day of rest, almost from God's perspective, in satisfaction of the work He had done, not in spite of it. And I think that's something that we have to learn to appreciate in our modern world. In Exodus chapter 20, we get the 10 Commandments. Verse 8 is the Sabbath. And there are more words written about the Sabbath than every other commandment combined. So we know it's important, and we know we have certain things that we need to take away from it for us to use to honor God and walk with Him daily. Exodus 20 verse 8 says this: "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work." In the King James it says servile work there, and I think that's important, so remember that for a little bit later. The Sabbath is about more than rest. It's about worship, reflection, and trusting God with our time, and I think that's important. Some people like to fish, some people like to go out and be in nature and take a hike, and there's this question of what does work actually mean? And so if we look at it from a legalistic point of view, you tend to spin yourself in circles, and I want to avoid that with some of these tips we're about to go through in this video, okay? And so if you are practicing the Sabbath, choose a consistent day. It doesn't have to be Saturday or Sunday, but pick a day that fits your rhythm. Now, technically speaking, Saturday is the Sabbath day according to the Jewish culture, which is Sunday was the first day of the week, and then Saturday was the last day, the seventh day, or the Sabbath day. But these days, after Jesus came, I think it's more than reasonable to say if you take a Sabbath day, I think you're still doing it right. And on that day, set clear boundaries. Let family or roommates know your Sabbath intentions. So if it's quiet time for you, if it's reflection time, if it's worship, if it's prayer, let people around you know what your intentions are, so that way they don't interrupt you or they don't expect you to get back to them as quickly as you normally would, perhaps. And as always, I would say begin with prayer. Invite God into your rest. Spend time with God. You know, there used to be days where my wife and I would get up on Sunday morning and we'd go to church, and then we'd either sing some worship songs together, do a Bible study together. We would even watch TV shows or movies that had a Christian theme or were based on biblical principles. And there was one of these days where she said to me at the end of the day on Sunday, she said, "We spent our whole day with God. Isn't that amazing?" And I said, "Yeah, that is amazing." But then I thought, why don't we spend every day with God? Like, why did we limit it to just Sunday? And so it was kind of this weird double-edged feeling that I had. But really, that's kind of the point of the Sabbath, is that we get distracted so easily in our lives that we need that reminder. Rest challenges our internal beliefs, right? Maybe it's guilt, thinking that rest equals laziness or fear, worrying that if we fall behind, we may not be good enough. Or maybe we've just lost touch with stillness, right? There's a psalm in chapter 46, verse 10. This is one of the more powerful psalms in there. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." We often think our value comes from constant output, but our worth isn't based on hustle. It's rooted in Christ. We're the ones who think that we have to keep working with our hands and keep producing to be valuable, but that's not how Jesus sees us. So how about this? Try starting with 1 hour, just one tech-free hour. Create a stop doing list. Identify what you won't do on the Sabbath, email or chores, or maybe it's a review, or maybe it's a side project that you have that you just want to not do on the Sabbath. It's taking your focus away from God. Name your resistance. Journal why you feel uncomfortable with the rest and invite God into that space. And this is going to look different for everybody. So I can't just say stop doing one thing and start doing another. For me, it's going to be different than what it's going to be for you. And if I'm being honest, sometimes taking a break from ministry is how you honor the Sabbath and keep it holy, even though the work that you'd be doing is still ministry. It's kind of a weird thing, but believe me when I say that if you aren't taking a rest, you really aren't trusting God. So if you're putting out all of the work, you're saying that if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. But if we trust God and if we're honest with ourselves, if we don't do it, we have to know that God has our back. So let's talk about Jesus and the Sabbath a little bit too. Jesus didn't abolish the Sabbath. He clarified its purpose. And this is something that honestly, it confused me for quite some time. But if you look at the book of Mark, chapter 2, verse 27, "Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." And if you have a red letter Bible, these are red letters, that's Jesus speaking to the Pharisees. Spoiler alert, we're the modern day Pharisees, people who are preaching the Bible and talking about it, and people that have gone to seminary. It's Pharisees. It was Pharisee school 2,000 years ago. Now it's just got a different name. Jesus was telling them that we aren't to give our Sabbath day back to God, for we can't give anything back to God. God gave it to us as a day of rest. And now he also lived it out. He modeled the rhythm of retreat and renewal. Jesus found himself alone praying and seeking that quiet time with God more often than anybody else in the Bible. In the book of Luke, chapter 5, verse 16, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." And he did this all the time. So what can we take away from these examples? So build quiet time into your Sabbath. Even 15 or 20 minutes of solitude can shift your spirit. Spend time in creation. Walk outside and let nature remind you of God's provision. Celebrate grace. Use the Sabbath to remember God's work, not yours. And also perhaps practice a time of forgiveness. And then there's this question of how should we actually practice the Sabbath today? Because a lot of the rules are quite honestly different. Maybe not rules, but roles and responsibilities are very much different than they used to be. So in a modern world, keeping the Sabbath isn't about legalism. Remember earlier when I said if we look at fine details of what we do on the Sabbath, we are very much at risk of being legalistic about it, when really it's about freedom. And here's some tips you can use to get started. Designate some time. So choose a full day or a 4 to 6 hour block each week and set a reminder to prepare beforehand. Food, errands, things that might come up, things that you know are going to cause you mental distractions. Take care of them early enough so that you can fully embrace your Sabbath time. I would encourage you to disconnect digitally, just honestly from the noise. Turn off notifications, maybe consider a 24-hour social media fast. I know people that do that quite a bit, where they'll take a digital Sabbath in addition to their Sabbath, and they'll put their phones in a basket and won't touch them. Another thing that you could do is engage in a worship and rest. You can read scripture, you can listen to worship or pray, you can cook a meal slowly, you take a nap, you can enjoy just the beauty of nature. Probably the biggest thing you can do is to invite others in. So if you Sabbath with family or friends or a small group or even your small church group, I think that way you can share what you're learning about God and rest with each other. That's probably the most fundamentally engaged learning you can do, is with other people. Our church is kind of set up in a way that doesn't encourage as much learning, where we go and sit and listen to a message. Although they're very good, that's not as engaged learning as what we're used to as humans. I would also say to stay flexible and faithful. And remember, life happens. Kids get sick, emergencies come up. Don't feel guilty if you have an emergency that comes up that takes your focus or attention away, or you have to make a different plan in the moment. But return to your Sabbath when you can. Remember, Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath to prove a point, to say, you can still do this on the Sabbath and it's going to be okay. I actually worked a side business once with my cousin, and he was a staunch believer in the Sabbath, and he asked me not to work the business on a Sabbath because it was part of his belief. And I said, okay, I can do that just the same. And while we no longer do the business, I wouldn't say it failed. We had some pretty high degrees of success with it. We just kind of eventually got out of the business. But I remember thinking this at the time, that I'm going to do this in faith and we'll see what happens. And God proved his might in that moment to me. It was pretty cool. So the Sabbath does change us. It reminds us of our true identity. We are God's children. We're not machines. I think it's important to know that even though we feel like we can do a lot of things, just because we can doesn't always mean we should. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, Jesus says this. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Take note here. Jesus is saying, yoke up with me, join me, and I will give you rest. So I think it's important for us to realize that rest is a gift from Jesus. The Sabbath can lead us to clarity, to peace, to a deeper relationship, a stronger connection with God. The Sabbath gives us that soul deep rest that we were made for. It's not just resting the body, it's also resting our emotional state, our spirit, our energy levels. All of that stuff is so necessary for today's world. How many people do you know today that take mental health breaks or suffer from burnout? Try taking a Sabbath. It might really help those situations. How about this? Keep a Sabbath journal. Write what God reveals to you each week. That way you can notice the fruit. If you've got increased patience, gratitude, and joy, these are all signs that the Sabbath is actually bearing fruit in your life. You might be surprised that just focusing on what you're grateful for changes yourself in such a significant way that you no longer see the world as such a negative place. You might also end up with this overflowing spirit, right? You can use the rest that you receive to bless others throughout the week. And they'll say things to you like, how do you do it? How can you always have such a great attitude? How do you have such good energy all the time? Well, I take a Sabbath. We used to call these a me day when I was a kid. I'm taking a me day. Well, maybe it just means a Sabbath. Taking a God day. In a world that never stops, Sabbath is a radical declaration of trust in God. It says, I am not in control, God is. I am not what I produce, I am beloved. And so this week I want to encourage you to schedule time to rest. Protect it, honor it, and see what God might do with your stillness. And if this encouraged you, like it, share it, subscribe if you're a repeat viewer here. It does help the algorithm, it helps the channel grow. And with your support, we can help the world rediscover the gift of holy rest. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.